Earlier today, some very big AFFC news just dropped, having some very major lore implications, primarily tied with the Feast for Crows prologue. We've got some confirmation of Sphinxes being real, glass candles potentially having more power than we initially thought, and a few other bits of evidence sprinkled about. Reddit user GSteph created a post on r/AFFC detailing what appears to be a genuine leak of various draft versions of the Feast for Crows prologue. If any of you remember a similar post a while ago when we saw the various draft versions of A Dance with Dragons, along with the infamous disapproval of the Is Bingen Cold Hands theory, this is actually the same Cushing library in Texas A&M, albeit from a different OP. Now there's a lot to unpack here, and I encourage you all to actually go look at the post on Reddit, which is linked in the description. But let's dive in. The post discusses the Feast for Crows prologue. In the published versions, we get a short story about Pate, who is desperate for money and steals a key from the Citadel and gives it to Jacques and Hagar, before dying in classic AFFC prologue fashion. However, the notes between Martin and his editors, as well as these drafts, make it clear that Martin struggled a bit with this prologue. OP tells us that Martin had 7 intentions with the prologue of A Feast for Crows. Firstly, to establish Westeros knows that Dany exists and that she has dragons. Secondly, introduce the reader to the setting of Old Town. Third, introduce Citadel characters which will appear later. Fourth, begin the Maester conspiracy subplot. Fifth, introduce House Hightower and demonstrate that they are actually quite powerful. Sixth, show the subculture of Old Town. Seventh, and most importantly, introduce glass candles and some of their abilities. To start off, this is all very fascinating. We as readers, of course, are aware that House Hightower is super powerful and that the Maesters are not merely an order of obedient doctors, but it's cool to have this solid confirmation from Martin himself. OP also notes that Martin really struggled with deciding about glass candles, their real abilities, and who Marwyn is as a character. Apparently the Gardner style of writing and all the open doors has its drawbacks. OP then notes that Martin wrote the prologue about a dozen times, but included 3 different versions for his editors to review. One is similar to what was published in A Feast for Crows, a shorter POV Pate chapter. Another is a longer and slightly altered version of this chapter, and the third is actually written from the perspective of Rosie, a serving girl who George was apparently planning on having be a somewhat important character. In both versions, the hooded man is seeking a glass candle, and delivers some fascinating lore, stating that the night is dark and full of terrors, and light can keep some fearful things at bay, even death. Fire was at the root of all Valyrian magic. With such candles men made themselves immortal. Dragon glass burns, but it is not consumed, and so long as the flame lasts, the man whose life it is bound to cannot die. So that's really cool. It actually confirms a few of my fire magic and glass candle theories, as well as a lot of other stuff. Primarily the idea that fire magic is the backbone of Valyrian sorcery, and that the heart of undying flame, or the idea that fire that doesn't die is kind of the source of life, is a real actual thing. I don't know if Martin still intends for glass candles to be able to cause immortality, but the reasoning follows what we've seen so far, and it has some really cool implications for Valyria. Quaithe and other Shadowbinders also have some experience with cheating death, and we know that Quaithe has a glass candle. If it's true that glass candles extend life, this lends heavy credibility to the idea that Alyssa Farman is Quaithe, who left Westeros from Old Town and sailed with 2 Hightowers. Both Hightowers and Old Town are linked heavily to glass candles in this prologue. There are a few other additions in the long version of the Pate chapter, such as the really neat heist sequence, and the idea that every Maester has a glass candle, but there's a few other bits here and there. The other big lore drop is from the unfinished short version of the Pate chapter, most similar to what we actually see in A Feast for Crows, where aside from some of the similar minor lore dumps about glass candles, we actually see confirmation that Sphinxes were real in some capacity in AFFC, all killed in the Doom of Valyria. I got into this a bit in my Fire Lions video, and added a touch of it more in the Fire Magic video, but I theorized that Sphinxes are Valyrian constructs. Euron, who has been to Valyria and seems to have somewhat mastered its corrupted form of magic, is seen in a vision blowing a great horn which commands Sphinxes, as well as Krakens and Dragons, which we already know Euron has plans to control. Valyria used horrible blood and fire magic to make things called chimeras, abominations that cobbled together various creatures. Sphinxes were one of these chimeras, and it's hinted that dragons may be another, a combination of fireworms and wyverns. Even if Sphinxes are supposedly extinct now, I think this passage confirms the theory that Euron will awake them from Valyria. Dragons, krakens, others, and unicorns, among with a few other beasts, are all thought to be extinct, or literally were, but have already turned in our story. I think Sphinxes are coming up next. Unfortunately, the Rosie chapter doesn't give us as much, merely a more effeminate description of Alaris the Sphinx, hinting that they might actually be Sorella Sand. Other than that, unfortunately not much interesting, though it would be really cool to read this Rosie POV, and I hope we get to see it at some capacity in some point in the future. But that's all OP gives us for now, though they do state there's a lot more to come, including a conclusive proof about one major theory that they are yet to reveal, as well as a few things about the Greyjoys and Daenerys. This story is just developing, and G-Steph is promising more posts eventually, so I'll keep you all updated. In the meantime, this all comes from G-Steph on Reddit, so please go visit that post, look it out. It doesn't have nearly enough upvotes. It was at like 16 when I checked. So let me know what you all think. Thank you all very much for 500 subscribers. Do take care, and I will see you all soon. Bye-bye.